Well-maintained equipment is fundamental to getting the best results in your work. So in this video, I'll show the methods, materials, and a few tricks that I use for keeping equipment in top-notch condition. Check it out. The projects I do at Next Level Carpentry put a lot of demand on the tools and equipment I use to get the work done. To make sure that the equipment is capable of meeting those demands, I do some preventative maintenance and give them some TLC in between projects so that I can focus on the work and not struggle to make the machines cooperate. The key pieces of equipment here, like this old Rockwell Unisaw, the Laguna bandsaw back there, and the Powermatic joiner, all have cast iron surfaces which take a little special care and attention to keep them in top-notch condition. So in this video, I'm just going to show the tools and materials and process I use for cleaning and maintaining cast iron surfaces and this laminate work surface on the table saw, and then I'll show quickly how I clean up and maintain the joiner and the cast iron table on the bandsaw. And this Delta Unisaw is a great example of what good preventative maintenance and upkeep can do. I've worked with this saw since it was brand new in about 1982. And with good preventative maintenance and a little TLC now and then, there's no reason this saw won't be able to keep doing its job indefinitely. Since my shop is small, this extension table on the table saw has to serve as a router table and also a work surface for building and assembling things. I end up painting here, gluing here, all sorts of stuff. So this laminate surface usually requires a bit of extensive cleaning and maintenance so that it's ready for the next project. So the first thing I do in preventative maintenance is always to remove the worst, biggest stuff first. I just finished up a messy project that involved using some epoxy, some polyester fillers, and a number of other adhesives and finishes. So there's some crud on here that I'm going to have to scrub off. Globs of glue or paint, all that stuff can be removed from durable surfaces with a sharp razor scraper. On this Formica surface, there's wood glue, CA glue, epoxy, polyester filler, all sorts of things, but because I've cleaned and waxed this before, they come off with relative ease. On painted surfaces like this tape measure, a fingernail is often the best tool for removing those globs of glunk. But when your fingernails are all gone, the next best thing is just a laminate sample chip. It's hard enough to remove just about anything from a smooth surface, but it's soft enough that it won't scratch paint or anodizing. There's some glue down in a crack here that I'm removing with a putty knife. A quick blast of compressed air. Is enough to remove whatever got scraped off in that process. The next step is to scrub off whatever stains and grime are left on the surfaces that the scraper wouldn't take off. This tends to be the most user-unfriendly part because it usually takes a pretty hot solvent to remove the stains that are stuck on to these surfaces. Use the best pair of rubber gloves you can, nitrile gloves, cleaning gloves, solvent gloves, whatever you're comfortable with for protecting your hands. And I'm using straight lacquer thinner and a piece of fine steel wool to scrub off these stains. Make sure there's no open flame, plenty of ventilation, yada, yada, yada. Keep yourself safe, but get the equipment clean. I don't use sandpaper on this. I don't use a Scotch-Brite pad. The steel wool is aggressive enough to get down into the pores of the laminate, but it's not so aggressive that it destroys the surface. Depending on the type of work I'm doing, I can go from 4 to 7 years in between replacing the laminate itself. I've got some chips here that I got from moving some heavy timbers around, but they're not problematic enough where I need to replace the whole laminate top at this point to get rid of them. After giving it a good soak and scrub down, I just use a paper towel to get the surface clean. I approach this systematically, doing one area at a time. Concentrate on stubborn spots to try to get the whole thing clean on one go. This removes all the pencil marks and reference marks that got sketched onto the table during the last project. In a perfect world, I'd have one of those beautiful hardwood bench tops, and I wouldn't give it this kind of harsh cleanup and treatment, but then again, I wouldn't be subjecting it to all the chemicals, solvents, adhesives, fillers, etc. that this top gets. Once I've given the top a once-over with the steel wool and thinner, I'll take another clean towel and clean off anything that's left behind. If I don't let this go too long in between times, it's a pretty quick process to scrub this up. I'll use the same process to clean this cast iron part of the table surface. This is clean with no glue on here, so it doesn't need the full treatment. And because glue and stuff doesn't soak in or adhere to steel or cast iron like it does to the Formica, this is a lot quicker, faster to clean up. And the goal here is to remove anything sticky and gummy that's on the metal surface. I'll make sure that I clean out the miter slots to remove any wax or glue that might have got caught up under those rails for the T-slot. Make sure that's good and clean. The next step, after removing the big chunks and giving it a good scrub down with a nasty solvent and airing out the shop, is to clean the stains and any rust off the cast iron surface. And hands down, the best thing I've ever found for cleaning and maintaining a cast iron surface is a Sandflex block. This is basically just like a rubber eraser, but it's got some sharp grit in it for scouring off the surface. I used the coarse grit on this particular tabletop because the milling marks on this old cast iron surface are pretty rough. And there's a distinct direction of the milling marks on this surface, and I try to follow the direction of those milling marks with my motion of the block to give it a nice, uniform, clean surface. Because I do this maintenance on fairly regular intervals, I don't have any deep rust to dig out of here, but once in a while I'll get a water spot or a spot of glue or some rust from a damp piece of lumber, and it'll take extra scrubbing to clean up the surface. And I really hope it shows in the video how great a job this block does for cleaning up cast iron. It just shines this up like new. There's some stains here that I'm going to get out. Like I said, the stains aren't too deep because I do this fairly often, every few months or between every 4 or 5 jobs. The same block will take out some pretty deep stains and rust if it's needed. I'd hate to have to do a whole rusty top with this. The best thing is to keep the top from getting that rusty in the first place, but sometimes more drastic measures are required to clean things up. I'm using the edge rather than the face so that I can really focus the scrubbing action and get a real nice clean surface. And there's no getting around the fact that no matter how good of a cleaning block I have, the key ingredient here is elbow grease. And I much prefer this doing by hand. A lot of videos show using an orbital sander with a fine sandpaper or a Scotch-Brite pad, but I don't want to subject my equipment to the wearing action of that process over time. Like I said, I've been cleaning and maintaining this very cast iron top since the early 1980s, and the edges are still crisp and sharp, and the miter slots are accurate and clean. If I was using any kind of sandpaper on this or a machine sander, I know that those edges would deteriorate over that amount of time. And in my opinion, this is a much more sustainable solution. I'll clean the miter slots out. I'll give my zero clearance insert a quick wipe with this Sandflex block to make it all pretty. And with that bit of elbow grease and effort, this top is all cleaned up and ready for a protective coat of wax. And use a little bit of compressed air to blow away the grit left behind from the block. Once I'm done with all the scraping, scrubbing, and solvents, I apply a heavy coat of paste wax. When the surfaces are clean, the wax really penetrates and binds to the surface. It makes material slide over the surface better, and it also makes cleanup in the future a whole lot easier. There's a lot of aerosol products for lubricating and protecting surfaces, and I've tried a few of them, but I always come back to paste wax. I am at a slight advantage here at Next Level Carpentry because the climate is dry. I'm able to keep the shop dry with electric heat. I don't have propane heat or anything. So in some environments, paste wax might be a little weak for protecting cast iron from rusting from ambient humidity. But for most shop conditions, and this shop in particular, the paste wax is the best solution that I've found. What you typically see is applying this paste wax with a rag That works fine, but what I found works really great for applying a uniform thick coat of wax in a hurry is to just take a clean, sturdy, dry cloth and spoon a glob of wax right into the cloth. Just fold that wax up in a glob and give the rag a twist until the wax starts to push its way through the rag. Then it's just a simple matter of applying the wax in a circular motion to the entire surface. The wax continues to work its way through the rag and apply a nice uniform coat without having to re-dip into the wax can over and over again. With the wax in the rag, it takes very little pressure to get a nice uniform coat. You can run this rag in through these miter slots. I like to do the rail where the rip fence slides. Makes everything run nice and smooth. You can see a little bit of grime still came off on the surface of that rag. And when I'm done, I just store it in an empty can of wax for the next cleanup and maintenance session. Once everything's got a good coat of wax, I'll just go back and start buffing it down. I just go over the surface to remove excess, rub it into the surface a little better, but I don't try to get it all cleaned and buffed and polished dry on the first pass. As I move from area to area, the wax continues to dry and stick to the surface. As the wax dries and is buffed off, you can see the sheen pick up on the surfaces, and the polished cloth, or paper towel in this case, just slides easier and easier across the surface, leaving a nice durable coat of wax behind. When the sheen doesn't change from one pass to the next, and there's uniform resistance as it slides across the surface, that's when you know you're done polishing. I've seen comments on other videos about concern that a wax film on the surface will get into the wood and make a stain or a varnish not stick. I have never had that problem. If I was to leave globs of wax around here, sure, that could get into the wood, but this wax is now here to stay. Because of the way I have this equipment set up, I give the base of my router table insert a quick coat of wax along with everything else. And dropping it into place completes the job. And with the surface all cleaned and waxed, materials slide nicely across it, and globs of glue and paint are easily cleaned up so that the machine performs at the level I expect it to. A few key differences are the milled finish on this is much finer than on the saw, so I use the medium grit Sandflex block to clean off any stains or rust spots that have gotten on here since I cleaned it last time. I'm very careful about keeping water and anything else wet off this table to preserve this smooth, nicely machined finish, but it does occasionally get a rust mark or a stain on it, so this medium grit block quickly takes that out. First I scrub out any small dark stains and then give the whole surface a uniform wipe with the block. Needless to say, the power is shut off to this machine. Quickly remove the fence to be able to clean the whole surface. As a testament to the value and effect of doing this preventative maintenance from time to time, I've had this joiner about 6 years, I believe, and the top still looks this good. And believe me, it's not from lack of use. If I had another $1 for every board foot of lumber I passed over this joiner, I could probably retire. You can see these small water spots in here. I'm giving them a focused rub with the corner of the block. I give the fence a good going over too. If you happen to have equipment that got neglected at some point during its life, I would say that any time spent cleaning it up and then maintaining that finish is well worth the effort put into it, because there's really nothing like using equipment that's clean and smooth and polished. And the wax ball and a rag makes quick work of applying that nice coat of protective wax. You can just tell when the buff down process is complete because the cloth or rag slips over the surface. I use the coarse block on this Laguna bandsaw table also because the factory milling texture is pretty rough and this doesn't spoil the finish. This piece of equipment sits near the door of the shop, and sometimes when it rains, water splatters in and can stain this top. But as long as I keep it clean, keep a good coat of wax on it, it doesn't create a real problem. Here again, I try to follow the milling marks with the direction that I'm scrubbing with this block. Because this surface only gets used for what it was designed for cutting wood, I don't have the scraping or scrubbing needed to clean off glue and other things that end up on my work surface. So the routine maintenance is a lot quicker on this machine. With that bit of messy routine maintenance and TLC taken care of, I got the equipment here at Next Level Carpentry ready to take on the next project. So I hope the tips and results that I just showed here will encourage you to maintain and clean your equipment so that it performs better on whatever projects you're taking on. I'll put a couple links here at the end of the video showing some of this equipment in use, and I'll include links in the description below to the Amazon Influencers page where you can get Sandflex blocks and these other supplies if you don't find them available locally. If you like this video, I hope you'll consider subscribing to Next Level Carpentry if you haven't already. And as always, thanks for watching.